Reading is a great way to maintain your attention span, and it can feel really daunting. It can feel like you'll never be able to get through a whole book, especially. I've just got a really big example here, which is War and Peace, which I read last year. And you would think this would be a nightmare to get through, but it really wasn't. I really immersed myself in it. I took notes, and that's what I kind of want to talk about today, because this makes for a better reading experience and also, I think, improves your quality of life overall and your attention span. So without further ado, let's get into it. I hope you don't mind that I use my notes here. I've written them down. And I wanted to start off with saying that a good reader isn't someone who reads fast, reads quickly, or not even someone who reads a lot. A good reader is someone who reads with a sense of quality over quantity, a really deep kind of reading that has intentionality. And I think using the analogy of exercise to explain becoming a deeper reader, becoming a more rehearsed reader, is a great way to explain what I mean here. So this is really about training the mind, and like exercise, you've got to build up these muscles. Becoming a better reader requires devotion and dedication. So I would say becoming a better reader requires you to take time out of your day to dedicate simply to just reading. And this can be half an hour, it can be an hour, it can be longer, and it could even be shorter. But I would say keeping up the momentum, making sure that every day you read at least a little. This is to firstly build up the habit, but also to basically build that muscle, build that reading muscle, so that you begin to expand your attention. The more you read, the more practiced you'll become at paying attention to what the book is saying, and the easier it will be to pass from page to page. And I think there's this idea that you must read plenty of books, and I've definitely fallen into this. I've wanted to read, every kind of classic book there is. And in reality, I don't like every kind of classic book there is. There are certain books I do like I really did enjoy War and Peace. But I am not the biggest fan, say, of Dickens, of Oliver Twist, for example. But it doesn't mean that there aren't classics that I do like. So just because you want to read a vast amount doesn't mean you'll actually like a vast amount of books. And actually, rereading books can be really helpful in understanding and truly taking in what the book is trying to say. For example, the first time you read a book, obviously you don't know what's going to happen. So you're taking everything as it comes. You're very much taken along for the journey. Whereas if you were to reread this book, you have an idea of what's going to happen, so you can see the book as a whole and start to take in the more minute details of the book, whereas on the first read you might miss some of the minute details. And I also just love to reread books that really spoke to me. Recently I just reread Blue Nights by Joan Didion, and the first time I read it, it was incredibly sad. It's about her daughter who sadly passed away at, I think, around the age of 40, when Joan Didion obviously is much older. And the first time I read it was obviously very sad, but now that I knew how the story would go, I was able to pick up on the really fine details and really get into the words and the way she uses words, the way Joan Didion uses words. And really, I felt very much more immersed because I wasn't just trying to keep up with the plot line. I think that you can really help yourself with finding books that you truly enjoy, and this can be a seasonal thing. I found that when I say seasonal, I do mean the weather, so I do mean spring, summer, autumn, winter, but I also mean seasonal for you. So what season of life are you in? some things will speak to you in certain seasons more than others, and some things will change in their meaning to you as you age and grow. For example, I read Lolita when I was a teenager, and I had quite a messed up point of view about it. I didn't understand entirely what was wrong. I thought that I can't remember his name. Is it Humbert or something? I thought that the male protagonist was a nice man, and only as an adult have I realised what this man was about. And so the first time I read it was in a season that the book did not speak to me in the same way as now that I'm an adult, it does. But that's an extreme case. There are also just seasonal reading in terms of some books are nice to read if you're on holiday, some books are nice to read in the winter, and certain books will speak to you at certain points in your life. And don't worry about this. I have a backlog of books that I know I would enjoy, but I'm not going to enjoy them now. So I've saved them for some point further on into the future. And actually, on this point, I wanted to bring up this app I've been using called Fabric, and it's a really great app that helps me log all the kind of media I like to use. I've been using it to log my books that I want to read, and books that I have already read, and then I wrote some notes alongside with it. And I've also been doing this for artists I like, and as well as films that I've films that I've watched, and also films that I want to watch in the future. And the reason I've been using the app in this way is because I've kind of find it a useful source dump. I've also put all my kind of articles that I find on this app, and it stops me from using social media. And I do like to engage with media. I will never not want to engage with media. I love film, I love books, I love TV, but I don't always want to be engaged. I don't always want to be engaged in the social part of it, because that's where I find I start doom scrolling. I want to form my own opinions, and I find that this allows me to categorize and save things that I'm interested in without having to engage with the social aspect of social media. I also have an affiliate link, so if you want 30% off and want to use it, then see the description box below for the link. Okay, so another thing I like to do to read more thoroughly and engage more deeply into a world is by reading lots of books from the same author. So, for example, Clarice Lispector, one of my absolute most favourite writers ever. I've read, I think, 4 of her books now. I've read Agua Viva, The Passion According to G.H., Near to the Wild Heart, and her short story about the rose. I've forgotten the name of it, but I've read those 4, and it's really allowed me to dive deeper into her world and how she thinks, and understand each book within the context of the other. And now I kind of understand even further where Clarice Lispector is coming from, and I find this just really interesting to also know the order in which the writer wrote these books, and it kind of creates another story for me to follow, one of the authors' lives, and where their mind was at and what they learnt from each book. I just find it really, really enjoyable to do and immerse myself in the world that author has kind of created. Another thing I like to do is go through my annotations. So the first annotations I'll typically either use post-it notes or just scribble on the pages of the actual book. And these are my initial thoughts, and these will be very emotional, charged thoughts that just came to me as I was reading. Then I'll take these notes and I'll start to just write small paragraphs about what I think about my notes and what I think about the book now that I've read the whole entire book and now that I have all my notes collected. And then from there I can start a mini essay. I can use it to do something like a larger project. It could be the start of a painting, because I've collected my ideas and I've thoroughly understood what I was thinking, now what I'm now thinking, and make sense of the book in an entirely different way relative to me. And this is always really interesting because this will be different for everyone, and everyone will have and take away a slightly different perspective from a book. So I love this exercise. It's really personal and I cannot tell you exactly how to do it, but that's the kind of outline and the guideline I would give for that kind of style of annotation. So my final point is, in order to make the habit easy, always have some kind of access to a book, whether that's bringing a book along with you, which I like to do. At the moment, I'm reading My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, and I picked this up in Italy because I had a book with me, but it wasn't fueling me in the right way. So I was like, I need to pick up a book that I'll really get into. That's the book I picked up, and it really fit the season. A holiday book about female friendship set in Italy was just exactly what I needed. And yeah, so the season thing worked well for me there. But also having access to a book is really important. And if you don't have a physical book, you can get Kindle on your phone, which I recommend and which I do have as well. And obviously you can also just get a Kindle. So I always have some kind of access to a book. Also, actually, something I found recently is someone's read the whole of Agua Viva on YouTube by Clarissa Spector. So there's always access to a book somewhere out there. That's actually another good point, which is that Audible is also a great source for listening to books. And I like to do this along journeys. At the moment, I'm listening to Territory of Light, which is basically about this woman who lives in Japan with her daughter, and she's going through a divorce and she's learning to live as an independent woman. It's an interesting book, and I really like how the narration sounds, and it's just really an interesting way of engaging with a book, feeling the words come off the page. Sometimes there's room for that as well, and it's something I do really enjoy, as well as having a physical book where I'll actually read visually. The books you choose to read determine what kind of person you want to be, what kind of things you want to understand. And I'm not saying this to say that if you read American Psycho, you want to do all the depraved things he does, but perhaps you want to understand this level of depravity. You're interested in psychology. And yeah, I just think that reading determines the kind of person you want to be, what your interests are going to be. It kind of feeds one another. So first of all, you have the interest, you find a book you like, and then it kind of spirals from there in a good way, kind of rabbit holes from there. And reading, it just brings such joy to me, and I find it a really useful way to learn about myself, learn about the world, learn about how I think about things, how I feel about things, kind of understand myself better. And I do this through reading. And when I read, I do like to engage with reading on this very serious level, because I think it's both fun and fulfilling. And I couldn't recommend, for example, writing notes down and recording your reading history, and not doing this to show others, which I was starting to feel a little bit like on Goodreads, and hence why I've now been using Fabric to do so, because it's more private and it's more just for myself to note down what I've read and make sense of things, basically. So I hope that I have convinced you to, if you're not already an intense reader, to read more mindfully and pay attention to things, not be afraid of a reread, and find books that really speak to you. It's so worth your while. And I will leave it here, and thank you so much if you've made it this far into the video. Please leave a comment below. Let me know how you like to engage with reading, whether you are a reader or not. I'd love to hear how you feel about the whole practice of reading and attention spans. So I will see you again for my next video.